their intelligence community hacked into the system, got access to 20,000 emails, including some that were just back in June. And then the second question is, you get that stuff, and what do you do with it? Do you want to let the target know that they've been hacked, or do you think that there might be more stuff that you just want to keep monitoring? And so somebody had to decide, let's share this stuff with WikiLeaks, and this has led to speculation that has been communicated by, among other people, Hillary Clinton's campaign manager, suggesting that Trump and Putin are a mutual admiration society. They've got a bromance going on, if you will, and that Putin wants Trump to be president, has concluded that putting these emails out are somehow going to help Donald Trump become president.
Well, let's put a little meat on the bone there. There's two specific accusations, one of which is from Donald Trump's still unreleased tax returns, claiming that there is at least a possibility that Trump could have Russian assets that it somehow could relate to the campaign, and the Russians would like him to continue doing business, and as president this could help. The second item, which I initially thought of as nonsense, but the Donald has made some interesting comments involving NATO, and as far as NATO allies not spending the amounts they should to contribute to the alliance. And with Putin's aggressive stances, most notably toward the Ukraine, but to a couple other border states to Russia, that there might actually be something to that, suggesting that the United States would not come to the aid of NATO allies that are bordering an aggressive Russia at the moment.
Well, and you've left out one other piece, which is that Trump's most senior campaign aide, a man named Paul Manafort, who did not have a great early week last week, stepping on his own private parts on a couple of issues, also has a long history of working with some Russian and Russian-friendly governments in Eastern Europe, particularly the Ukraine. Here's my thought on all of that stuff. Folks, I appreciate that you don't want to talk about the content of 20,000 emails that are very embarrassing and very problematic in trying to keep the Bernie folks in the tent. The other stuff, for me at this point, is kind of interesting, unproved, borderline wild speculation. Here's the problem. If I'm Putin and I'm watching the U.S. election, I'm thinking, wow, what a mess that is. Hillary Clinton, we know her. We know her people. We tried this reset thing. We got along. She made us mad. We made her mad. We kind of know how she functions. And then there's this Donald Trump guy who has used a couple of Russian billionaires, as I understand it, as partners in some of his projects. But maybe those are billionaires who are on the in with Putin, on the outs. I don't know.
I don't think you can be a Russian billionaire and not be on the ins with Putin.
Well, there's some who are in jail, so
hence my point.
But they don't lose everything necessarily if they get some of their stuff, some of their money out. But if I'm Putin, sure, I would love to undercut NATO, because as the Soviet Union broke up and a number of former members of the Soviet Union were desperate to want to join NATO, and a number of them have, and NATO is an alliance. It's the North Atlantic Treaty Organization. There's a treaty that all parties have to live by. It's not a transactional proposition, some kind of a business deal, the way Trump tends to think about this stuff. It's an alliance, and we don't get to willy-nilly decide, yeah, we promised this, but this is a weak member of the alliance. If the Soviets were to invade Latvia, and this was an example that came up, what would America do? And Trump suggests, well, if they're not paid up, we might or might not help them. It's not how these things work. Everybody's up in arms and fearful, and maybe Putin says, ha ha ha, yeah, undercut NATO. But Putin, it's hard to believe that Putin would love the idea of a wildly unpredictable, ever-changing, inexperienced American president like Donald Trump. Every time people think they know where he stands on something, he shifts again. So the Democrats would love to say the Russians got it and they're trying to help Trump because they don't want people to talk about the content of the emails. I think it's a little premature to move away from the content of the emails.
Well, just because what the Democrats would like it to be doesn't necessarily make it false. But Congressman Al, as somebody who was an adult through the Cold War and even served in office during that, is this National Enquirer kind of stuff, or could there be a grain of truth? Like, what's your take on it?
I think there could be a grain of truth to it, but we don't know for that for sure. It seems to me that Putin should be smart enough not to mess in this. There's all kinds of problems of backfiring in international deliberations and what have you. And if I were Putin, I wouldn't want to get caught doing that. If the Democrats play it right, this could be a very, very difficult thing for the Republican nominee. So, what does he get out of it?
Well, what it does, though, if you're Putin, what Trump has already said is, I'm no fan of this guy. I complimented him once. I think it's more than once, but I think what he said was, I complimented him once as being a tough guy. I'm impressed with tough guys, but I'm no fan of him or Russia. And the last thing Putin would want, if he liked Trump and hoped for Trump, was to contribute to creating a political problem for Trump that would cause him to take a new tough hard line with Putin and with Russia, which we all know Trump is perfectly capable of pivoting from one position to another on just about any issue out there.
I believe using the phrase pivot would suggest a nuanced refinement that is not there. I don't know if we have the exact word in the lexicon to describe how Trump moves from one position to another.
Well, I'm thinking about it in the conventional basketball term, where you're standing in one place and suddenly you leave one foot in place and you move the other foot, you spin around rapidly, smash into the opponent, and then move on. So there's nothing subtle about pivot is not always a subtle word.
Fair enough. Well, that being said, and this is a story that we're going to keep monitoring as it continues to play out, because I have a sneaking suspicion since the FBI is involved, this isn't going away anytime soon. But we did actually have the first day of the DNC yesterday. For the actual speeches, the two most noteworthy were both Bernie Sanders and Michelle Obama. As far as I know, Michelle Obama's speech was not plagiarized off of Melania's, but who knows. But Congressman Al, what did you think of the first day of the DNC?
Well, aside from all the crap that we've been discussing, it was a great first day for the Democrats. Starting with the First Lady's brilliant and very effective speech. I thought that Elizabeth Warren's speech was good, and I particularly compliment her on not falling for trying to deal with the heckling that was going on at the early part of her speech. You could hear it going on, and she just plowed right through it.
That the heckling from the Bernie Sanders supporters included the phrase, "We trusted you," that was shouted from the floor, was part of the heckling.
Yeah, well, I couldn't hear what they were saying, and I don't know whether Elizabeth Warren could either, but the fact that when you're giving a speech and something surprising like that happens, there's a tendency to stop and rethink and whatever, and she just kept plowing right through, which is the appropriate thing to do in a situation like that, and it worked. They finally calmed down, and she was able to make the rest of her speech, which I thought was good in several respects, supporting some policies that I think the Democrats will continue to pursue.
Including the reinstatement of Glass-Steagall was part of the party platform.
Right. I remember my good friend, who was at that time the chairman of the Interstate and Foreign Commerce Committee, John Dingell, absolutely opposed doing away with Glass-Steagall. And I think some events since have indicated that that was probably the right position. So she did touch on that. My point is that she got through her speech well. I think it was not as good as, and not as effective as Michelle Obama's was. And for that matter, Bernie Sanders' speech was obviously a major part of the evening, and while I thought it was way too long, it was patting himself on the back, and that was too long. It was to be expected. It had to happen, but he did it too long. And then when he pivoted, if you will, to talk about the fact that he endorsed Mrs. Clinton, that was too long. I mean, he could have said, we worked hard and did great, and these are the great issues, and then pivoted to, but we still have to support Hillary Clinton, and he could have done that in 20 minutes instead of, 45?
I'm really tempted to ask Al to explain to the listeners Glass-Steagall, but I'm going to resist the temptation and reflect on last night. I was with 5 other people, and the person we were all most interested in hearing was Michelle Obama. She's the one about whom she's the one everybody knows, but we have never seen her, or we don't remember her in this kind of a situation. She spoke about her husband before, in the famously so, in a way that Melania Trump copied a few sentences. But what she was we're tired of hearing Bernie. The only question with Bernie was, so how full-throated will his embrace of his endorsement of Hillary be, and how will the crowd react? Elizabeth Warren, we've heard before. She struck me as kind of flat last night. She had the misfortune of being behind Michelle Obama's speech, which was extraordinary. It was delivered in a firm but low-key way. We have all these politicians who want to yell at us, and she reminded us, you don't need to yell. Let the sound system project. Now, she had the advantage of silence in the room, because it wasn't just the 6 of us in my house waiting for her. That whole hall was waiting for her. And conventions are notorious for people not turning their attention to the podium except for a few people that they want to hear. There's noise, there's side conversations, there's laughter, there's yelling. That place was quiet. Now, when it's quiet, you don't have to raise your voice to get attention, but she delivered this like a pro and had a terrific message, and focused on family, focused on a woman candidate, focused on her children. It was really, really good, prompting one of the people in my group to say, that's the one I want to be president. I said, fair enough, yeah, but we maybe senator first. Let her get some real work.